All right, we're going to cover CER, or Claim Evidence Reasoning, in this video. Now, CER is a way for us to report on the data that we get after a lab. Okay, it's a way for you to state what you found out, what evidence or data you have to support it, and give me a scientific reason behind why you got that data. The reason we use CER is because it is a more simplified version to get to the bottom of what we found out. In the real world, a scientist is going to write a huge research paper after they've done an experiment and done some research. Okay, at the very end of that research paper, they have a discussion section. In that discussion, they're going to do something similar to a CER, but it's much longer and more intense. Okay, so this is taking that idea of discussing our results, but putting it in a simplified format that works for introduction to biology. So let's get started. Now, you need to know that science, the basis of science, is questioning. We need to ask questions about the world around us, okay, not just blindly going through without thinking about anything. You need to look at the natural world and have questions. Okay, those questions in life can lead to experiments. They might lead to research. Maybe you come up with questions just on your own and you're Googling, why is this? How is this? Okay, that's all the scientific method that you're going through, the scientific process. Okay, scientists do that too. They ask questions about the topic they are studying, and they're probably going to check, hey, did anyone else ask this question? Is there anything out there that might tell me the answer? Okay, so they might find other scientists have studied this before. They're going to go and read through those big long papers. They're going to look at each other's results, review them critically, analyze them. They might even try to replicate them. Okay, this leads to something really important called a peer-reviewed study. Super important. Scientists need to repeat their experiments and get similar results. Different scientists around the world need to be able to confirm, hey, the way they did this is accurate. Okay, and then if you're looking at a study that is not peer-reviewed, you don't know if that is a factual study or if there is a bias behind. The person is trying to sell you something, or they're trying to push their idea of what the answer is to their question onto you. You want to look at things that have been reviewed by many other people. Okay, now we know that science is always changing. We're asking new questions all the time, and even the greatest scientists have failed, made mistakes over and over and over and over, and you might not hear a lot about them. You're going to hear Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein did these wonderful things and they made these huge breakthroughs, but they failed so many times before they got to that place. So don't forget that in life when you try and try and try and you keep failing. Just keep going. Okay, now types of scientific questions that can be asked. You might ask a question and it might be not testable, meaning you could not conduct an experiment based on that question. Okay, so maybe I'm watching my dog play around in the yard and I'm wondering, do dogs enjoy chasing squirrels? Well, what's wrong with that question is, how do I measure the enjoyment of my dog? Well, maybe you're going to base it off of, is the dog wagging its tail or not? Well, it's pretty hard. We can't ask our dogs, are you enjoying yourself? We might be able to know, but it's really not a testable question. I'm not going to conduct a whole experiment based on that. Or you might ask a question that you could easily find the results to, like, why is the sky blue? Okay, people have already studied that question, and it's more of an explanation than an experiment itself. So we would just type that into good old Google and look for a credible resource to find the answer. Okay, maybe you come up with a testable question, but it's not practical. When I say practical, I mean it's not something that you or I would be able to do in the classroom. So I really want to know, how much water is needed to put out the sun? Well, first of all, that'd be a big problem. All life would decimate if we didn't have the sun, but that's not something you or I can go and test. We do not have the means to get to the sun and to acquire enough water to attempt to even put it out. Thank goodness. What about, how does sun tanning affect skin cell DNA? Well, in our classroom, we just don't have the equipment to be able to look at DNA within our skin cells, and we might not have the understanding of how to do that. So it's testable. Someone might be able to do it, but it's not practical for our classroom. Now, the questions we want to focus on are those that are testable and practical. So here's something. How does caffeine affect plant growth? I could acquire some caffeine, some powdered caffeine, maybe mix it with some water, and test over a certain period of time. How does it affect the height of the plant versus a plant that does not get caffeine? Okay. How does eating processed foods affect physical stamina? Okay, we could do an experiment where a person eats only processed foods for a certain period of time. Another person eats whole, natural vegetables that have not been processed. They test their stamina before and after doing this, and we compare the results. Okay, so those are testable. We can get data from them. Now, what is CER exactly? You may have done CER in the past, but let's break it down. Why are we doing this? It's organized. There's 3 parts, and they're defined pretty simply. We want to create a conclusion for our experiment. Maybe we want to make an argument. Okay, so maybe we're looking at something controversial. We want to look up evidence to support what we believe in the area of science, or maybe we're looking at a science article and we want to conclude that article using a CER. Okay, let's look at the claim. The claim is super easy. It is one statement that answers the question. It's typically one sentence, unless you're asking a multiple part question. Here's an example of a claim. If my question was, how does fertilizer affect plant growth? I do some type of experiment with this, and at the end, I get the result and make a claim to say fertilizer makes plants grow faster and taller. Okay, one statement. Super simple. The evidence, think data, numbers. Most of our labs, you will have some type of numerical data. Sometimes you get a lab where you don't have numbers, but maybe you have observations or descriptions. Okay? So the evidence is that data that supports the claim you just made. Numbers, observations. Let's look at our fertilizer example. The evidence. The plants with fertilizer grew 12 centimeters tall, while plants without fertilizer grew 9 centimeters tall. Fertilizer resulted in plants growing 3 centimeters taller. Okay, so we used numbers and we basically just restated the evidence we would have had in a data table. Reasoning. Okay, this is the part that you're going to have the most difficulty with, but it's pretty simple once you get a hang of it. Reasoning is the scientific explanation. It's the science behind why did this happen in the lab. Describes why the evidence supports the claim. Now, you're going to maybe have to do some background research, cite your sources, maybe use scientific principles or laws. If I'm talking about gravity, doing some experiment, dropping, I don't know, an apple, and I'm going to use the law of gravity to support that in my reasoning. Or I'm going to use stanford.edu as my source. Okay, you have to have some basis behind what you're saying, something that's credible. Okay, so let's look at an example talking about fertilizer. Here's my reasoning. It's a real short one. You will be writing probably longer ones than this. Fertilizer contains nutrients like potassium, phosphorus, and nitrogen that are needed for plant growth. If the soil does not have enough of these nutrients, this stunts growth. And then I add too much fertilizer can also harm the plant. And I'd probably go on and discuss a bit more. You can see I have a source below. I found this information at frontiersin.org. Okay, let's look at one more example before we wrap up. Okay, here's my question. How does training, as in like running, affect mile run time? Claim, okay? The claim comes after you have done an experiment, got your data. I'm looking at my data table and I see that training every day for 1 hour improves mile run time. One sentence statement. Evidence. Where's my data, my numbers? My mile run time before training was 6 minutes 58 seconds. My mile run time after training every day for 2 months was 6 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay, stated that evidence. Reasoning. Training your body by working out and running builds muscle, which makes you stronger and able to run faster. Training also makes your heart more efficient at pumping blood and delivering oxygen to muscles. Then I would also want to list my source. But since I'm a biology teacher, I just knew it. But okay, so this is your CER information. We'll be using it throughout the year. We'll keep practicing, and I hope this was helpful.